What would you do if your entire village was dying of thirst? Not hunger, not war, but thirst. Imagine waking every morning knowing that the water your child will drink today might make them sick tomorrow. Imagine watching the land crack open beneath your feet while the sky remains silent. This is not just a story about a village. This is a story about faith, about pride, about sacrifice, and about a stranger who appeared when hope was almost gone. In the heart of Igbo land, there once stood a proud village called Amaukwe. They had culture, they had strength, they had tradition, but they did not have water. And when the dry season became merciless, when prayers seemed to bounce off the sky, a tall old man walked into their square and asked for the one thing they did not have to give. That single request would test their humanity. Because sometimes, a miracle does not begin with power. It begins with compassion. This is the story of the village that thirsted, and how one decision changed everything. If you love powerful African stories filled with mystery, culture, and life lessons, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now. Because the story you are about to hear, you will not forget it. Now let me take you to a village in the heart of Igbo land. In the heart of Igbo land, surrounded by red earth and tall palm trees, there was a village called Ama Okoye. Ama Okoye was not a small, forgotten village. No, it was a village of pride. During festivals, its masquerades danced like spirits from another world. Drums echoed across the hills. The elders spoke with authority. The children ran barefoot across the dusty square, laughing freely. Travelers from neighboring villages would say, if you want to see true tradition, go to Ama Okoye. But behind the beauty, behind the colorful festivals and sacred rituals, there was suffering. Ama Okoye had no stream, no spring, no river, not even a small trickle of water hiding between rocks. When the dry season came, the land cracked open like broken pottery. The air became heavy. Dust rose with every step. Even the leaves on the trees seemed tired. Water became more precious than gold. During rainy season, the villagers would gather at the village square. With hoes and shovels, they dug a massive hole beside the ancient Iroko tree. It was deep, deeper than a man's height. They plastered the inside carefully with thick clay soil so the rainwater would not escape. When the rains finally came, the hole would slowly fill. Children would clap with excitement. Women would lift their hands in gratitude. Men would say, the gods have remembered us. But that joy never lasted. Because when dry season returned, the water in that hole turned brown. Thick, still, mosquitoes danced above it. Sometimes, small animals fell inside. Children slipped and struggled to climb out. There were days when a mother would scream because her goat had fallen in and drowned. But what choice did they have? That muddy hole was their only source of life. Every morning before sunrise, long lines of women stood beside it with clay pots balanced on their heads. Arguments broke out. Fights sometimes happened. Because when water is scarce, patience disappears. Even the strong began to grow weak. The elderly coughed more often. Children fell sick. And every evening, when the sun burned orange across the sky, the elders gathered in the shrine courtyard. They prayed to the gods of their land. They poured libation. They called upon their ancestors. Spirits of Ama Okoye, have we offended you? Why must our children suffer? Send us water. The wind would blow, but no answer came. It felt as if heaven had turned its face away. Then one afternoon, during the harshest part of dry season, when the sun was so hot that even birds hid in silence, the villagers were gathered again at the muddy well. Sweating, arguing quietly, scooping water carefully so the sand would not mix too much. That was when a shadow stretched across the ground. Long, tall, unfamiliar. An old man stood at the edge of the square. He was taller than most men in Ama Okoye. His hair was long and white like Hamatan mist. His walking stick touched the ground softly. His eyes were calm, too calm. The villagers looked at one another. No one had seen him enter the village. No one knew which path he used. Yet there he stood, watching them fetch muddy water. And then, he spoke. Good people of Ama Okoye, may I have water? Silence fell over the square. Because asking for water in a thirsty land was no small request. And that was the moment everything began to change. The old man did not rush. After drinking the muddy water, he wiped his lips slowly with the back of his hand. The villagers were still watching him. Some whispered, "Where did he come from? Did anyone see him enter through the eastern path? Is he from the neighboring village?" But no one could answer. Then the old man spoke calmly, "Take me to your king." His voice was not loud, yet it carried authority. The villagers hesitated. Strangers did not simply request audience with the king of Amalkwe. But before anyone could respond, Ikena, the son of the village hunter, stepped forward. There was something about the old man that did not frighten him. "I will take you," Ikena said respectfully. A few young men joined them. As they walked through the dusty paths of Amalkwe, the sun seemed to soften slightly, as if clouds were trying to cover it, though no clouds were visible. Even the wind changed. The palace of Amalkwe stood proudly at the center of the village, built with thick mud walls, decorated with white chalk patterns drawn by the women of the royal household. Guards stood at the entrance holding spears. When they saw the old man, they crossed their spears. "State your mission." The old man simply smiled. Tell your king that a traveler seeks his ear." Something in his eyes made the guards uneasy. They went inside. Moments later, they returned. The king had agreed. Inside the palace courtyard, the king of Amalkwe sat on a carved wooden throne, draped in royal cloths. Coral beads rested proudly around his neck. His presence commanded respect. When the old man entered, he did not bow too low, but he bowed just enough. The king studied him carefully. There was something unusual about this stranger. He did not look like a beggar. He did not look like a wandering madman. He looked ancient. The king welcomed him warmly, as tradition demanded. Food was brought: pounded yam and vegetable soup. Palm wine was poured into a calabash. The old man ate slowly, peacefully, as if he had all the time in the world. After the meal, the king clapped his hands twice. Guards rushed in. "Call the chief priest," the king ordered, "and summon the elders." Soon, the palace filled with the most respected men in Amalkwe. The chief priest entered last, his body marked with white chalk, his eyes sharp with spiritual awareness. He sat down. Silence filled the courtyard. Then the king spoke. "Stranger, speak. Why have you come to Amalkwe?" The old man stood up slowly, leaning on his staff. He looked around at the king, the elders, the chief priest. Then he said, "I have traveled far. I have seen many lands. But my spirit is drawn to this village. I wish to live among you." My muse filled the air. Life among them, a stranger. The chief priest narrowed his eyes. "Why Amalkwe?" he asked carefully. The old man smiled faintly. "Because your people are kind, even in luck." The king remained silent, thinking deeply. It was dangerous to allow outsiders to settle in sacred land. But rejecting a traveler without reason could anger the spirits. After a long pause, the king said, "If you truly wish to live among us, you must follow our customs." The old man nodded. "I will honor your traditions." The elders discussed among themselves. Finally, a decision was made. They would give him land, but not near homes. They would give him a portion of thick forest near the village square. A forest untouched for years. A place many believed spirits already lived. The king stood. "Come, choose your portion." The entire council worked toward the forest. The air inside was cooler. Birds flew suddenly from trees as they entered. The old man walked ahead confidently, as if he already knew the paths. He stopped at a particular spot. Dense trees, thick bushes, dry ground. He struck his staff once against the earth. "This is enough." The elders looked around. Nothing special, just ordinary forest land. Rituals began immediately. A live goat was brought. Tubers of yam were placed before him. Kola nut was broken. Prayers were spoken to the ancestors to accept the stranger. The goat bleated loudly, almost desperately, before the sacrifice was completed. For a brief moment, the wind circled strangely around them. Leaves spun, and then everything became still again. The chief priest studied the old man carefully, but he sensed no evil, only mystery. After the ceremony, the old man turned to the king. I will return in 3 days to build my hut. The king nodded. You are welcome in Amalkwe. The old man began walking away from the forest. No one noticed that as he worked, the dry leaves beneath his feet did not crack. No one noticed that the heat around him felt cooler. No one noticed that the ground where he struck his staff looked slightly damp. 3 days. That was all he said. And Amalkwe had no idea that in 3 days, their history would change. 3 days passed. The old man did not return. The sun rose and set. Dry wind swept across Amalkwe. The money well beside the village square grew smaller each day. But inside one compound at the edge of the village, another kind of dryness lived there. Ikena's home. Since his mother died, peace had left that house. His father, once a strong hunter, had become quieter after remarrying. He spent most days in the forest, returning late, avoiding conflict. But Ikena's stepmother, she had a heart like cracked earth. Cold, hard, unforgiving. She never called him, my son. She called him, hunter's burden. While her own children ate the best parts of meat, Ikena ate last. While they slept, he washed plates. While they played in the square, he fetched firewood, swept the compound, carried water, pounded yam. And on that third morning, she woke him before sunrise. Lazy boy, she shouted, kicking lightly at the mat where he slept. Go to the deep forest and bring enough firewood for 3 days. Ikena's heart dropped. The deep forest, that was the portion of land given to the strange old man. People whispered that spirits roamed there at noon. Even grown men avoided going too far inside. But her eyes were sharp, waiting, daring him to refuse. His father said nothing. He simply adjusted his hunting bag and walked away. Ikena carried his rope and cutlass silently. As he stepped out of the compound, his stepmother muttered under her breath, "Maybe today the spirits will answer me." He held her, but he did not speak. The forest swallowed him slowly. The deeper he worked, the quieter everything became. No birds, no insects, just the sound of dry leaves beneath his feet. Nch, nch, nch. He remembered the exact path where the elders had taken the old man 3 days ago. The trees seemed taller now. The air felt cooler, strange, because outside, the sun was burning. He tightened his grip on the cutlass. I will be quick, he whispered to himself. He bent down to gather fallen branches. That was when he held it. At first, It was faint, like wind brushing against leaves. But it wasn't wind. It was flowing. Water. Ikena froze. Water. In dry season, his heart began to race. He stood up slowly and followed the sound. Step by step, the sound grew louder, rushing, powerful, alive. Then the trees opened, and Ikena saw it. A river, not a small stream, not a puddle, a massive, shining river flowing exactly where dry ground had been 3 days ago. Clear water moved with strength. Sunlight reflected on its surface like broken glass. The ground around it was damp and fresh, as if it had always been there. Ikena dropped his bundle of wood. His breath left his body. He stepped closer. The water was real. He could hear it, smell it, feel cool air rising from it. He looked left. The river stretched far into the forest. He looked right. It flowed outward, toward neighboring villages. Impossible. This land had been dry for generations. His hands trembled. Was this a spirit trap? Was this how his stepmother's prayer would come true? Suddenly, the river rippled. Not from wind, from something beneath. Ikena stumbled back in fear. Then he remembered the old man. The staff striking the ground. The promise to return in 3 days. His eyes widened. Without thinking, he turned and ran. Branches scratched his arms. Thorns tore at his legs. But he did not stop. He burst into the village square, sweating and breathless. The villagers stared at him. "My king," he shouted as he ran toward the palace. "There is a river in the forest." People began murmuring immediately. A river? In dry season, he has been in the sun too long. The king did not dismiss him. Something in Ikena's trembling voice felt real. Guards were sent to follow him. The entire village watched as they disappeared into the forest. Minutes felt like hours. Then the guards returned. Their faces pale. Their steps hurried. They knelt before the king. It is true. Silence fell across Amalkwe. Women covered their mouths. Men stared at one another in disbelief. The muddy well beside the square seemed to mock them. The king stood slowly, called the elders. The emergency drum was beating. Boom, boom, boom. Amalkwe had never heard that rhythm for water before. And somewhere deep inside the forest, the river continued to flow. As if it had been waiting for someone brave enough to see it first. And that someone was the boy that tried to break. The emergency drum echoed across Amalkwe. That was not the rhythm for war. Not for festival. Not for death. It was the rhythm for something the village had never faced before. A miracle. Men grabbed their staffs. Women lifted their wrappers and hurried behind. Children ran, whispering excitedly. The king walked in front, surrounded by his guards. Behind him came the elders. Last of all walked the chief priest, his body marked in white chalk, his face serious, sensing something beyond the ordinary. And beside the gods stood Ikena, quiet, shaking slightly. When they reached the forest clearing, the entire village froze. There it was, the river, wide, clear, alive. It moved with confidence, as if it had flown there for centuries. But everyone standing there knew the truth. 3 days ago, this ground was dry. The king stepped forward slowly. He removed his royal cap, a sign of respect to unseen powers. The elders bowed their heads. Even the chief priest seemed humbled. The air suddenly grew cooler. The trees began to sway though there was no wind. The river rippled violently. Then, a thunderous voice burst from the water. "Step back!" Women screamed. Men stumbled backward. Even the king stepped away without hesitation. The voice was not like human speech. It echoed from everywhere at once. From the sky, from the trees, from inside their chests. Again it spoke. Only the boy shall come forward. The forest fell silent. All eyes turned to Ikena, the son of the hunter, the unwanted child, the one sent into danger. The king nodded slowly. "Go, my son." Ikena's legs felt weak, but something inside him, something calm and steady, pushed him forward. Step, step, step. He stopped at the riverbank. The water began to rise, spinning, glowing, and then, from the middle of the river, a figure began to form. Light gathered like mist, water lifted upward, and there he stood, the old man, but not as the new him. His white hair now shone like moonlight. His body radiated brightness. His eyes carried the depth of oceans. His feet did not touch the water. Gasps filled the forest. Some villagers fell flat on the ground. The chief priest dropped his staff in shock. The old man's voice was calm now, yet powerful. "People of Amalkwe," his voice rolled like distant thunder. "I came to you as a thirsty traveler." Tears began to fall from many eyes. "You gave me water when you had little. You showed kindness when you were suffering." The king bowed deeply. "Forgive us if we did not recognize you." The spirit lifted his hand. The river glowed brighter. "I am the spirit of water. I heard your cries in the dry seasons. I saw your children struggle. I saw your elders pray." Some women began to weep openly. "From today, Amalkwe shall never lack water again." A collective cry of joy erupted, but it quickly faded as the spirit raised his hand again. But blessings come with laws. The forest seemed to listen. Even the birds did not move. The spirit turned his glowing eyes toward Ikena. This boy was kind without pride. He did not insult a stranger. He spoke truth. Ikena trembled. "From today, Ikena, son of the hunter, shall be the keeper of this river." Shock spread across the elders. Even the chief priest stood in disbelief. The spirit continued, "He shall be the priest of this water. Through him, the river shall speak." Then the laws were declared. Women may swim in this sacred part. No washing of clothes in this section. No woman in her monthly flow shall fetch from here. No fish from this sacred site shall be killed. The Spirit's voice deepened. Whoever disobeys shall answer to the river. The water rose higher, swirling around him. Lightning flashed across a clear sky. Thunder cracked once. The Spirit looked at Ikena one final time. Do not fear your suffering. It prepared you. Then, the light exploded. The river crashed down with force, and the Spirit disappeared beneath the surface. Silence, heavy, sacred. Ikena's body shook. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. Women screamed. Men rushed forward. The king himself knelt beside the boy. The chief priest quickly began chanting protective prayers. Carry him to the palace. As they lifted Ikena, the river calmed. Soft, peaceful, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. But everyone knew Amakwe would never be the same again. Because the river had chosen a boy, and heaven had finally answered. They carried Ikena like a sacred vessel. The king walked beside him. The chief priest chanted softly. Women cleared the path. No one spoke loudly. It was as if the entire village understood that something holy had happened. Inside the palace courtyard, mats were spread. Herbs were brought. Sacred chalk was placed beside the boy. The Ezemo knelt and began ancient prayers passed down from the ancestors of Amalkwe. Smoke from burning leaves curled into the air. Ikena's chest rose and fell slowly. Outside the palace, villagers gathered in silence. Even the money well near the square seemed forgotten. For the first time in generations, Amalkwe had living water. After some time, Ikena's fingers twitched. The chief priest stopped chanting. The boy's eyes opened slowly, but they were different, calmer, deeper, as if he had seen something beyond the human world. The king leaned closer. My son, can you hear me? Ikena blinked. He nodded weakly. A collective sigh of relief swept across the courtyard. The chief priest studied him carefully. Then he bowed his head slightly, a gesture no one had ever seen him make to a young boy. The river has marked him, he said quietly. Outside, word spread quickly. Ikena has awakened. Women ululated. Men beat their chests in joy. Children danced. But inside one compound in Amalkwe, fear and shame sat heavily. Ikena's stepmother. She had held everything. She had held that the river spirit appeared. She had held that the boy she mistreated was chosen. Her hands trembled. For the first time since she married into the hunter's home, she felt small. That evening, when Ikena was strong enough to work, he returned home, not as a burden, not as a servant, but as the chosen priest of the river. Villagers followed him. His father walked beside him, pride shining in his tired eyes. When they entered the compound, his stepmother rushed forward and fell to her knees. "Forgive me," she cried. "I did not know heaven was watching." Her own children hid behind her, ashamed. Ikenna looked at them quietly. He remembered the insults, the hunger, the dangerous errands, but he also remembered the Spirit's words. "Do not fear your suffering. It prepared you." He lifted his stepmother gently. "Let the past flow away like water," he said softly. The villagers murmured in admiration. From that day, everything changed. The river became the heart of Amalkwe. Clear water flowed day and night. The muddy well beside the square dried completely and was filled with sand. Children now laughed beside the riverbank instead of crying beside a dirty hole. Women sang as they fetched fresh water. Farmers' crops grew greener than ever before. Neighboring villages came to witness the miracle. And at the riverbank stood Ikenna, dressed in white cloth, coral beads resting lightly on his neck, sacred staff in hand. He obeyed the laws given by the Spirit: no washing in the sacred parts, no killing of fish there, no breaking of purity. Whenever someone attempted to disobey, strange things happened: sudden sickness, broken pots, or dreams filled with warning. Soon, no one dared to disrespect the river. Years passed. Amalkwe became known not only for its masquerades and festivals, but for the river that appeared in 3 days. Elders would sit under the moonlight and tell children, "Never mock a stranger. Never look down on the suffering. The gods sometimes walk among men in disguise." And they would always end with this: "Kindness brought water to Amalkwe." As for Ikenna, the boy once sent into danger became a man of wisdom. He served the river faithfully. He protected its purity, and the river protected the village in return. Even today, if you visit that land during dry season, you will hear water flowing. And some elders will whisper, "That is the river that chose a boy."
If you love this story, let me see it in the comments. Type "Water is life."